Welcome to the American Institute of Healthcare Professionals video on signs and effects of trauma or abuse. And in this video, we're going to look at trauma again and how it operates within the human person, and then cover also its many lingering effects on the mind, body, and soul, as well as some signs that may emerge to a counselor that indicate past trauma itself. Again, the most important thing to begin with any type of trauma-informed care is understanding the reality of trauma. 70% of the world population has experienced some type of trauma within one's life. 75% are children before the age of 16. So trauma then leaves an imprint on the subconscious mind that will not leave until it is faced and healed within a therapeutic relationship. Until then, the trauma can remain within the subconscious mind and forcing mental maladies upon the person, such as anxiety, depression, or PTSD. Trauma itself can also be caused by other human beings through acts of violence, or through natural disasters or other social related issues. It can be singular or collective in its experience. Studies show, though, that singular experiences at the hands of another human being in a violent action are the most devastating and damaging of all trauma-related incidents. When understanding the reality of trauma within a population, and understanding that in many of these cases, the trauma doesn't emerge later in adulthood, we can look very closely. It's referred to as adverse childhood events, or ACE. And within that, we can see that many children, young adolescents, experience a wide variety throughout their life of maybe abuse, violent crimes, exposure to shootings, maybe just simple neglect in the household, or on a social scale, dealing with poverty, starvation, seeing death rampantly around oneself, or maybe a death of a family member in a very traumatic fashion. Maybe socially they are in a war zone. They find themselves in refugee status. Maybe they experience genocide of other family members or friends. So there are a lot of events that can occur within one's childhood, these adverse childhood events that can be exposed later in life, where signs and effects of trauma manifest, not just in adulthood, but also in the child's later life, days, weeks, months afterwards. These effects will linger, but they only get worse as they are left to be unresolved in itself. It's important, though, that we remember that the event itself does not trigger a long-term trauma effect, albeit it's influential, but it still is very objective in its very nature. It's how one experiences it and the effects that follow that truly determine whether one will have long-term effects of trauma, such as depression, anxiety, and PTSD itself. It is important then also to look at, in terms of trauma, how we survive traumatic experiences. When we face a crisis situation or a survival situation where our body responds, whether it is walking down the street and an armed assailant coming at us, or whether we are in a grocery store and we start to hear, unfortunately, maybe gunshots. What is the response to this? How does the body respond? And there are a variety of ways, and no way is in particular right. Within our very genetic self and also our human experiences, our treasure chests of knowledge that we've accumulated throughout life, all of these things contribute to maybe how we will react in a given situation. And it might not always be the same. Different circumstances might dictate different reactions. But they are the reactions that come to us first, and usually the ones that we act upon unless we're trained like a special forces individual to be aware to control our emotions and have a mechanical response in itself. But most of us don't have that in the population. So what we're looking at here is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And those are the four basic survival responses. So an individual might fight. They might look to physically resist, fight the assailant, fight against the situation. And that might be the best bet maybe for survival in this particular situation. Other individuals might look to pursue flight. Flight is a way to escape the situation. Maybe simply getting into the car, driving off, or running is a way to prevent injury or harm to oneself and to survive better than fighting. So many will employ these first two. However, there are other responses between just fight or flight that we commonly see in the sympathetic nervous system when a stressful event occurs. Sometimes we also freeze, and this is a person who become immobilized and unable to react. And this can be due to extreme fright or flagging. And flagging is also equivalent to flopping, where an individual just basically loses all control of themselves. So the body in some ways disassociates because it's so horrible, so frightening from the traumatic event. And in this, the person, women who experience sexual assault, they can become trapped in this experience and they might not even be able to move. However, the brain is very much operating at an emotional level, at a very primal level, sense, sounds, and sights, but very little rationalization. So many details sometimes that survivors have of an assault, the details just aren't there. But the memory, the scent, the sounds, the sights can very easily trigger that emotional part of the amygdala. Because remember, in trauma, the actual traumatic event isn't properly stored. The memory itself isn't stored in the prefrontal cortex. It's a loose memory that can be very easily triggered because it hasn't been processed, because it's so horrible. And it has imprinted itself in such a different way. And this happens with a lot of individuals in survival responses when they freeze. The freezing can even go a step further, where they're not only just experiencing the traumatic experience, but they are also in a way turning themselves completely off. An individual might become unconscious during a traumatic event or an assault. The body just simply shuts down because it cannot handle what is occurring in itself. Finally, fawning. And fawning is very much a very human adaptation. It's not seen in the animal kingdom. But the person, in hopes of avoiding death or worse injuries, can sometimes befriend the assailant or cooperate with the perpetrator. And sometimes we see this with children who are confused because the perpetrator shows love and mercy at times and then shows grotesque hatred and anger at another time. Or if a woman is being raped, she might hope to limit the damage by cooperating with the assailant, or by maybe going along with what they want to do in terms of taking particular drugs in hopes of maybe later getting away. The problem is, well, none of these are wrong responses, but the problem is that cognitive distortions later develop within the survivor, within the victim. And they can create shame, they can create regret, they can create guilt within the person. So a woman who is raped might have said, well, I should have ran more. I should have tried to get away. Or she might be ashamed that she cooperated and feel that she is dirty, that it's part her own doing and she did it to herself. So there are a wide range of these emotions. I mean, just look at soldiers. Sometimes they freeze in battle and then they feel like they don't have courage and they have something to prove, or that they are cowards. So these cognitive distortions exist, And following these distortions, especially if it's not spoken about, they can lead to other deeper emotional events, depressions, anxiety, and PTSD. The biggest thing that counselors can do is let individuals know that their survival responses were what was best for them in that given moment, and they can't regret it. They can't feel shameful of it. They just need to learn from it. And many counselors can see signs of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn within particular individuals who might be exhibiting certain behaviors. And that might be a telltale sign of something that they're dealing with in terms of their own particular survival response. In addition to this, many who suffer severe trauma suffer from intrusions. There are a variety of different types of intrusions that can occur. Now, since the trauma memory isn't properly stored and filed within the prefrontal cortex, the memory remains strong within the amygdala. So anything that can trigger a scent, sound, or sight, it can make the person relive the situation, even though nothing is really going on. There's no danger at the moment, but the present situation resembles the past in some primitive way of a scent, sound, or sight, which triggers the person into this. So these intrusive thoughts can emerge and haunt the person. This can also occur in flashbacks where the individual is kind of taken away from the present and is not cognizant of what is around him or her. It can be through severe nightmares. It can also become through more intense flashbacks through dissociation. And sometimes in dissociation, an individual seems outside of their body and they lose control. They also lose control of their senses. So these are all very common symptoms of unresolved trauma that is found in PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And if these things are occurring, these are some of the most physical manifestations and signs and effects of past trauma that a counselor can find in someone. There are also other effects and signs of trauma that affect our emotional regulation and also how we see the world. So we can enter into new states of being through hyperarousal, or what we refer to as hypervigilance. So the sympathetic nervous system is activated very easily for individuals who are experiencing PTSD or survivors of a particular trauma in itself. And the sympathetic nervous system can be activated even to non-threatening situations that resemble the original trauma. So this can put the survivor in a constant state of hyperarousal or hypervigilance because they want to protect themselves from this horrible thing from occurring again, or maybe protecting others. Classic example of an ex-soldier. He may watch a doorway when he goes to a restaurant because something bad happened in a war zone where a friend might have been killed through a militant combatant coming through the door and shooting them. So this might make them very aware of all exits and entry points. A survivor of a rape, maybe in an alleyway, may be very scared to cross the street by an alley or walk by an alley. A person who is involved in a shooting or any type of public type of terrorism, a bombing or a shooting, they may be afraid to go back to those types of places or be in large public crowds itself because there is this hypervigilance and hyperarousal of it possibly happening. Some may resort to not going anywhere. They might look to have complete seclusion and to barricade themselves in to where they live and look for every possible way to safeguard themselves, to foolproof their home, and to go to excessive steps to protect their family members, their children, to the point of insanity almost, to an extreme which is perfectly normal to them. But because of the hyperarousal state is causing this intense overreaction in itself. The problem is when these states hit, these individuals are unable to emotionally regulate and again find grounding. And this is where counselors come in. They can help individuals find grounding to regulate themselves, better and to recreate new meaning through CBT of what's going on, or through exposure therapy to begin to reassess the trauma and to be able to file it properly so it's not triggered as easily, causing these states of hyperarousal or hypervigilance themselves. In addition, new concepts about the world may emerge. You can have an individual who has never been a victim of a crime suddenly be robbed and beaten. And now all of a sudden, their perfect view of the world isn't so perfect. It's a world of lawlessness. It's a world of pain and suffering. Some individuals might have lived that their whole life, and they might have that worldview, which is negative, and they expect bad things to happen, while others may come into this new existential crisis of this new worldview. And it could also be spiritual views of how they perceive God and good and evil in itself. These types of worldviews, whether they're engraved into the individual at a young age due to early childhood trauma and just a bad life, or for someone who suddenly is exposed to trauma in adulthood, this can all lead to maladaptive behaviors and unnecessary emotional distress, which can lead down a dark road of isolation, bitterness, and substance abuse in many cases. Long-term trauma then, when left untreated, can lead to many things that damage mind, body, and soul. Physically, the body is exposed constantly more because of the sympathetic nervous system's reactions, its activation. It pours cortisol and adrenaline into the body in short bursts. And this is good for survival, but it's damaging if one is constantly in this state of stress, where one's heart rate, where one's muscle tension, where one's blood pressure is escalated due to this. It's not good on the internal organs. So individuals who never receive treatment, this long-term state of stress and hyperarousal can lead to heart issues, blood pressure issues, as well as chronic inflammation diseases and with the immune system within the body itself. Mentally and emotionally, the person who is left without treatment can deal with states of depression, anxiety, PTSD, and other suicidal ideations that may come with the severe trauma. Socially, the person will become more isolated due to inability to regulate their emotions. Because of that, relationships may be affected, broken marriages, isolation, lack of employment, lack of financial success, all because of this fear to grow and interact in life because of this anchor that is around their neck. Behaviorally, many survivors are at higher risk for re-victimization because of the fact of the unresolved trauma. And because of this, they enter into many maladaptive coping strategies. Some may be addicted to alcohol or drugs. Others may engage in risk-taking behaviors, sexual deviancies, and other forms of maladaptive coping that all increase the risk of early death or disease transmission in some way or another. So untreated trauma is a serious health risk in itself. So if you have unresolved trauma and you've listened this far, I highly recommend that you go and you open up and begin the long healing process. And for those of us in mental health care, it's important to identify these things in our clients through trauma-informed care itself. So we are AIHCP. We have a wide variety of behavioral health certifications. Below is our link. Our phone number is 330-652-7776. And our email is info@aihcp.org. I'd like to thank you for listening and have a good day.